Hey guys, so today I wanted to talk about spray tips because there are so many different spray tips when it comes to line marking. Now my personal preference is to use the XHDs over the RAC5s, and that's simply because of the cost difference when you buy so many spray tips as we do. But one of the key things you may be wondering is exactly which size spray tip should you be using? Well, that's exactly what we're going to cover in this video. So we're going to get the machine out, get each of the spray tips set up. I've got a whole different range of them here. We've got the 215, the 321, 331, 333, 325, 327, 419, 425, and finally a 427. We're going to set each one of these up at a 6-inch height off the ground from the spray gun itself, and then we're going to spray a line in and see exactly what it looks like, how wide it is, and hopefully that helps you guys pick which spray tip you're going to go for on your new line marking machines. Let's jump straight into it and I'll show you what we're up to. So I've got the electric machine out today, the ES1000, and I've actually not used this machine in quite a while. So we'll just get it set up. I'm going to be using an acrylic paint today because I think that's, it's a nice paint. It's what we often use on concrete. The one we're using is by a company called Lineway. So this is just a standard single part acrylic, which you guys may be picking up from, well, wherever you get your paints from, but it's not too thick. It's quite a nice sort of viscosity on this one. I usually spray it around 1500 PSI. We're going to start out with the 215 tip, 1500 PSI, 6 inches off the ground. Let's get it set up and I'll show you what it's like. Okay, let's get our gun set in the cradle. Now what I want to look for is around 6 inches from here to the ground. So we might have to lower it ever so slightly. All right, so that's 6.5. You know what, that'll do. We're gonna go for that. Let's get our spray tip inserted. All right, let's give it a go. So this is the single part acrylic. We've got it all mixed up. Taking a whisk to it just to give it a really good mix. And then I run it through the pump for a couple of minutes. Get it set up on here. And I'm running at the minute, let's get this to around 1500 PSI. Shall we? We'll just climb that ever so slightly higher. All right, about 1500 PSI. Let's get this thing tested. We'll see what it looks like putting a single line down. So this is a 215 XHD tip. In terms of line width at 6 inches, we are sitting ever so slightly just over the 2-inch mark. I'm just gonna recheck my height on here as well. I think I've gone a little bit high. So if I just get that spray tip about there. Yeah, I'm actually sat, I don't know if you guys can see, probably just over 6.5 inches. So I might just lower that down ever so slightly. So we just readjusted to 6 inches. Let's just see if it does anything different this time. Okay, so we've gone next to it. To be fair, it's exactly the same measurement. We've moved it 1/2 inch, so this is just over 2 inches, 50 mil wide. Now I think that's a perfect size because if you're doing netball, tennis, any sort of sports court, or even actually a lot of double yellows we're putting into 50 mils now, that's a perfect size, to be honest. All right, let's switch up the 215, move up to the next size, which is, it is the 321. Let's do it. 1500 PSI, same again. That's a lot bigger line. Okay, let's measure, see where we're at. Now again, we're 6 inches off the ground, 1500 PSI. That is about 3.5 inches. If you're doing a parking space, I'd say you want to go ever so slightly wider, up to a 4-inch, but at 1500 PSI, that's where it's at. Let's just try raising the PSI to about 2000, just see if that does it for us. You know what, we're at 1750 here. I'm just gonna try that, see if that's any better. It's a little bit, it's not quite wide enough. I'm gonna go to 2000. Now, I gotta say, I think 2000 PSI, it's an okay pressure. Let's check here. So that's bang on, 2000 PSI. We're about bang on the 4-inch mark. So if you're gonna use the 321, 6 inches off the ground, maybe bang it up to 2000 PSI. I think that'll work an absolute treat. What we'll do then is we're going to run the rest of these tests around 2000 PSI as well. So I'll just up it from the 15 we were doing, and we'll just see if it makes any sort of difference to the lines themselves, see what they look like. Now, you can spray these machines anything up to 3300 PSI, but I prefer not to, simply because it wears the pumps out quicker. So I like to keep my pressure lower That's typically what I would do, is keep the pressure a little bit lower, raise the tip a little bit higher, less wear on my pump, and that's just the way I prefer it. But of course, you know, it's each to their own. If you want to run 2,000, 2,500 PSI, you can run these all day long. Just make sure you're keeping up with the throat seal liquid. Keep it topped up every single time you use it. That'll protect the pump, keep it lasting a lot longer. And let's face it, these pumps are super expensive. All right, this one, we are changing to the 321. Let's get this tip installed. Okay, so we are now 2,000 PSI. I gotta say, I love the look of this acrylic paint. Now, believe it or not, that is actually a thinner line. Let me show you with the camera. So the line we just put down there is thinner, but when I say thinner, I mean width we're talking, but actually there is a lot more paint on the ground. Now this has got 2 coats on it over here. This one has only got a single coat, so it's a much thicker finish. I actually prefer the finish on this. Now this one here you can see was at 1500 PSI. You can see the 2 different tram lines. You see the original line was here to here, and then the thicker line, when we upped the pressure, was there to there. This one here you can see again the difference. But I actually quite like that finish, to be honest. It's a bit more jagged. It reminds me more of thermoplastic. But I think when it comes to finish and what your customers expect, they kind of want it looking thicker than just the paint. I don't know if it's harder to see on camera, but you can see the difference between them. Certainly when you're looking at them from here. I prefer the 321. Sorry, what is that one? We'll just double check it. Yeah, sorry, a 331 that was. I actually prefer it. I've always used a 321. So hey, I've learned something new myself. I actually prefer that one. All right, let's set up the next tip. Something I would actually recommend you guys look at is, I'll show you a close-up real quick. This is the tip saver. It's essentially just a bucket, but it has like a little housing thing for all of your spray tips, which is just fantastic. Now, of course, I've spilt some thinners on the ground, which is never ideal, but hey ho, I'm gonna line over it anyway. We have the 325. I think I got those in a slightly wrong order. Let's chuck the 325 on. So again, with 2,000 PSI, 6 inches from the ground. That's a nice line. That is a really, really nice line. Okay, let's get the tape measure, get a close up. I know it's hard to see because they're all yellow, like hard to see the difference, but honestly, it's a nice finish. It does look brilliant, actually. Look at that. So this is a 325 tip, and I have to say that's fantastic. Now, 2,000 PSI, what are we looking at? It's actually only 3.5 inches. Yeah, it's only 3.5. Now, we started at the start on this one at about 4 inches, but these machines, they sort of like, they're high pressure, then they drop, and then they start to build again, which I find really, really annoying about these machines. And it's just under 4 inches at the end. But at the middle, we're looking 3.5. Yeah, see, I don't quite like that finish in the sense that it's dropping and sort of wobbling a bit. Now, we're quite a high pressure. Like I say, I wouldn't normally go quite as high on the pressure. The paint itself, apart from that slight wobble, I mean, you can just about see it here. This is a really short line. If you were doing a longer line, you probably wouldn't notice it. And to be fair, like, it's not too bad. You can see at the start, though, the second and third, they were quite bad, where they've gone really wide and then they sort of thin and then go wide again. This one's a bit more consistent. But next up, we are going for the 333. Let's chuck that one in. I'm gonna run out of road here for this. Okay. Now this one is showing a very, very thick finish. It has dropped down ever so slightly in terms of width. Now the end of this, the finish, 2,000 PSI, 333, that's showing just over 3.25 inches at that point. And you're getting a little bit of that sort of wobbly effect at the beginning still, where it starts thicker. I prefer the one next to it. Yeah, I definitely prefer the one next to it. But hey, it still looks pretty good. So I think, like, looking at these, the main difference I'm seeing between all of them isn't so much the line width. I mean, we can see here the line width is definitely bigger, fine. But otherwise, I mean, these two are my favorites so far. This one and this one. second and fourth. But we're getting enough paint on the ground. This one I'd say has the perfect amount of paint, number 3, but I don't know. Still, I don't know, it's just not my favorite. Next up, we've got the 327, got the 419, 425. Lastly, the 427, this is a fairly big one. You wouldn't believe how much it actually costs to run a test like this to buy all these spray tips. Let me tell you, they might be cheaper than the RAC 5s, but this is an expensive test. So we are on to the 327 now. Let's get this one in. So 2000 PSI, 6 inches. Lovely finish. Wow, that is a great finish. So here it is. This is a 327. Let's see what we're at. Consistent 3.5 inches. So if you wanted to go 4 inches, I'd say raise that spray tip ever so slightly. But look, it's such a lovely finish. There's no transparency in the paint whatsoever, which I do find you get. Let's look at these ones here, the first ones. Even the second, you get ever so slight bit of transparency in it. But as we've moved down, getting better and better each time, I think. All right, let's set up for the next one. Next one up for us. So that was a 327. Next up, we have 419. Another really popular one for us. We buy an awful lot of the 419s. Let's get this one set up. Okay. Wow. Just wow. So this is 6 inches off the ground. Exactly the same height, exactly the same PSI. This is 1500 PSI. Now I think it looks a little bit thin. I would say that while it may look okay on the camera, the paint itself is too thin looking at it like this. And now this is bringing up a 5 inch, 5.25, I would say, is what it's giving us. But the line itself, it just isn't thick enough. There's not enough paint on it. So although we use a lot of these, I would say that's not quite good enough, that finish. I would typically drop that to the ground a little bit lower if I were doing a 4-inch line. Keep the PSI where it is, say, and it'll do better for you. I personally think that you'd need to either do that or double coat it. Now, the problem with double coating is you need to allow it to dry in between. You can't just go straight over it because it won't dry properly and you'll get like a film underneath it. All right, next up we have, this is the 425. We're going for the same fan width. What we're doing is relying more paint onto it. So we want a little bit more paint on the ground. We should see the same width, but we should see more paint. That's the idea here. All right, let's give that a go. Better, way better. Now as a comparative, what I might do, in fact, let me show you this. I'm gonna pull that arm out so it goes over the top of the other line. But what I'll do, if I show you a close-up here, you'll see that I've gone over it and the line width now, just over 4.5. And again, yeah, just over 4.5. But I think if you lowered that PSI, I normally do 1500, like I said. I think if we drop that to 1500 PSI, that would look amazing. In fact, let me do that right now. Let me just drop it to 1500 PSI. We'll give it another go. And we'll just go over the top of this one, see if it looks any thinner. 1500 PSI. All right, there we are, we're at 1500. See how that one looks in comparison at 1500 PSI. Again, super hard for you guys to see because it's yellow on yellow. Let me get you a close-up though. So, you can just about make it out, but it's there. It's about 4, if I bring it here, it's about 4.5 inches. Still a little bit wide. You can go a little bit close to the ground though. Okay, this is the very last spray tip we're going to be trying today from the XHD range. Believe it or not, running even a small experiment like this is super expensive, especially if you're only going to use 1 or 2 of the tips at the end of it and the rest of them are like, they're not quite right. So, final tip of the day. we are going for the 427. Now I've dropped it to 1500 PSI, so to keep it fair, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna raise it to 2000 PSI, put the line in, drop it back to 1500 where I would normally spray, and then I'll spray over the top and hopefully you'll see the difference between the two of them. Let's do it. So this is the 427 spray tip. Now I know I said I was going to do that, but you know what? I just kept it at 1500 PSI because I wasn't even thinking. I was just too excited to use this tip, but I'll go back over it. Hold on one sec. We are looking at just under 4 inches. And I have to say, it's nice. I think it must be really hard to see on camera, but you can see I've got 2 lines on top of that one. But that's a really nice finish. It's sort of semi-profiled, but at that sort of speed, it's great. I actually think my favorite is this one here, which is number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. They're my favorites. This one was at 1500 PSI. Let's get the final bit in 2000 PSI. We'll see how she looks. All right, so we'll raise this now. 2000. Now it's noticeably wider by about 1/4 of an inch at least. That's just over 4 inches. Let's just show here, just so I've got it about right. That's about smack on. In fact, I don't think you can get much closer to 4 inches than that. Let's just try that line on its own, just to see how thick it looks. Wow. Now I have to say, when it comes to delivering enough paint on the ground and looking good, I'm wondering which is the best line out of all of them. Now if you look at the first few, you can see that like the machine has this, like number 2 looks really, you know, it's got a big thing at the end here. Number 3 sort of wobbles in and out. Number 1 I think is too thin on the ground. Number 4 looks good. Number 5's got that wobble at the start. Number 6 looks a little bit better. 7, better again. 8, really nice and smooth. 9 looks good. 10 looks great as well. In fact, let's get a close up here. Now this arguably has got 2 layers on. This number 10, 1 layer. But look at the finish. I mean, that is super crisp. The edges look great. You don't get the sort of powdering effect on it. It's got a really nice finish. You're not getting too much of a sort of wobble at the start either. It looks pretty consistent all the way through. In fact, I might say that I've just found my favorite new spray tip, which is the XHD. Let me just pull it out. And this one is the 427. That is phenomenally good. That is so good. I reckon that's going to be the new tip I use for 4-inch lines, because the finish I just got off that at 2000 PSI, wow. All right, so that's pretty much it for this one. I have to say my new favorite is the XHD 427. Does a fantastic line. We're talking 4-inch lines here. This is for parking spaces, hatch lines, disabled bays, anything like that. This is the typical line you're going to put in. Now, if you're going to do a lorry bay, you may want to go a little bit wider. Typically, we go to say a 200 mil or something like that. But then I also might just look at a hand screed MMA for that as well, because it's such heavy duty and you don't want those lorry tires turning on it and, you know, just taking the paint straight up. So probably an MMA if I were really going to do a lorry bay. But to be fair, these look pretty good. They're great for standard sort of lines for parking bays. I wouldn't use it for super high traffic areas though. I would probably go again, like I say, MMA will work an absolute treat for that, or a thermoplastic. But if you were thinking about spray tips, which one to go for, XHD, I think this is my new favorite. Anyway, that's pretty much it for this one. And yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. I will see you all in the next one.